In the royal compound of Chief Obadike, deep in southeastern Nigeria, lived a girl named Zina. She was quiet, smart, and kind, but to her family, she was always the one who didn't fit in. Her stepsisters wore shiny gowns from overseas and had long, fake lashes and lace wigs. They walked around like princesses, smiling wide when guests arrived. But Zina? She was hidden. Every time someone important came to visit, someone in the family would whisper, "Send her to the kitchen. She might embarrass us again." And just like that, Zina was gone, sent to the back, chopping onions, washing plates, staying out of sight. Her clothes were simple, her voice soft, and they thought she wasn't good enough to be seen. While her sisters laughed loudly in the parlor, showing off their phones and pretending to speak with foreign accents, Zina stood barefoot on the cold kitchen floor. The smoke from the fire stung her eyes, but she stayed quiet. No one asked if she was okay. No one even noticed when she skipped meals or stayed up late studying under a broken bulb. They didn't care. They just wanted her out of the way. But what they didn't know was that Zina was listening. Watching. Learning. They thought they were hiding her because she was weak, but really, they were hiding the strongest one among them. And one day, the same kitchen they used to hide her in would become the place her story began. "She still stutters when she speaks," one cousin blurted out during a loud family party, laughing so hard she had to hold her stomach. The room joined in with giggles and side comments. Some covered their mouths pretending to be shocked, but they were all entertained. Zina stood there for a moment, quiet, her smile fading just a little. Her own mother was sitting nearby but didn't say a word. She didn't even look at her daughter. Instead, she shifted in her seat, pretending she hadn't heard anything. That hurt more than the laughter. It always did. Zina had grown used to this, being the joke, the quiet girl, the one who never spoke up fast enough. Since she was a child, her stutter made people treat her like she was slow, like she had nothing important to say. They never noticed how she looked people straight in the eye, how calm and focused she was. They never cared that she had built something powerful with her own hands. So, when the laughter rang out around her, Zina just smiled politely, stood up, and excused herself. No drama. No words. Just grace. She walked outside, where her Uber was already waiting. What nobody knew was that, just minutes before arriving at that party, Zina had been on a video call in that same car. And on that call, she had closed a business deal worth millions, a funding round for her tech company. The investors were impressed by her ideas, her quiet confidence, and the steady way she explained her plans. Her voice had cracked once, sure, but it didn't matter. She still got the deal. And that one call would change her life forever. As the Uber drove away from the family house, Zina looked out the window and sighed, not with sadness, but with peace. They could laugh. They could whisper. But none of them knew who she was becoming. While they judged her for not talking fast, she had built a company from scratch, hired people from different countries, and solved real problems using technology. While they mocked her stutter, global leaders were sending her emails asking for meetings. Inside the party, no one even noticed she was gone. They didn't ask where she went or why she left. But Zina didn't need them to notice. She wasn't trying to prove anything anymore. She had already proven it, not with big speeches or loud clothes, but with quiet moves and smart decisions. She had learned how to grow in silence, how to use pain as fuel. Every insult, every laugh, every ignored moment had shaped her into someone unshakable. And maybe one day, those same cousins would scroll through Instagram and see her face on a Forbes cover. Maybe they'd hear her name in a meeting and wonder if it was the same girl they used to laugh at. And maybe, just maybe, they'd remember that moment at the party. When Zina walked out, quietly, after closing the biggest deal of her life, while they were still busy laughing at a stutter that never stopped her from speaking success into reality. The Umuahia Heritage Gala was a grand event, bright lights, expensive perfumes in the air, and every important family dressed like royalty. The Ogonwas were buzzing with excitement. That night, they had only one mission: to impress a visiting billionaire from South Africa. He was powerful, rich, and respected across the continent. Everyone wanted to be noticed by him. The Ogonwas had been preparing for weeks, buying new clothes, rehearsing their greetings, even planning what jokes to laugh at during dinner. But there was one thing they didn't prepare for: Zina. From the moment she arrived, dressed in a simple but elegant gown, her aunt looked at her with tight lips. "Don't ruin this for us," she whispered, grabbing her arm lightly but firmly. They didn't want her sitting close to the guest of honor. They told her to sit at the far end of the table, next to the servers, almost out of sight. It was like they were afraid someone important might speak to her and realize she was different. To them, Zina didn't belong in a room like this, not with her quiet nature and plain ways. Zina said nothing. She smiled, nodded, and took the seat they gave her. She had long learned how to survive these moments, with grace. She watched as her family smiled wide, tried to speak with polished accents, and laughed too loudly at the billionaire's jokes. They passed wine like it was magic and told stories that weren't even theirs, just to sound impressive. But everything changed after the main course. The billionaire, scanning the room slowly, stopped mid-sentence and stared toward the far end of the table. "Wait," he said, standing slightly. "Is that Zina Abedijk?" Everyone turned. Zina looked up, calm as ever. Her family froze. "The CEO of Neurotech?" he asked. "You're the one who just signed that deal with Elon Musk's innovation team, right?" The room went silent. A fork dropped. Someone coughed too loudly. Zina's uncle almost choked on his wine. All eyes were now on the girl they had tried to hide. Faces turned pale. The Ogonwas were frozen in shock. Nobody had seen this coming. For years, they had treated her like a shadow, but in one moment, her light filled the whole room. The billionaire walked around the table just to greet her properly. He shook her hand with real respect, then took the seat beside her instead of staying with the family that had tried so hard to impress him. Zina stayed calm. She smiled, nodded, and spoke only when needed. But inside, she knew this was the moment. Not for revenge, but for quiet justice. All those years of being looked down on, ignored, and pushed away had led here. At that table, the same people who told her to sit far away were now wishing they had treated her better. Their pride had led the whole show, but tonight, it became their funeral. Because the girl they tried to hide didn't just belong at the table, she was the table. And without even raising her voice, Zina had flipped the whole room upside down. Just before dessert was served, when everyone thought the evening had gone perfectly, something happened that no one expected. The music was soft, laughter still filled the air, and the smell of vanilla cake was slowly drifting from the kitchen. Everyone was relaxed, especially the Ogonwas. They thought they had made a great impression on the billionaire guest. They had laughed too hard at his jokes, told fancy stories, and showed off their connections, even ones they didn't really have. They barely noticed Zina sitting quietly at the far end of the table, away from the spotlight, just where they wanted her. Then the billionaire, a well-known businessman from South Africa with investments all over the world, looked around the room. His eyes stopped on Zina. He stared for a moment, confused, then surprised. Slowly, he stood up, still looking directly at her. The room went quiet. "Wait," he said, loud enough for everyone to hear. "Is that Zina Abedijk?" His voice carried so much weight that even the servers paused. You could feel the tension rise. All heads turned toward Zina. She looked up calmly. "The CEO of Neurotech," the billionaire continued. "The one who just signed with Elon Musk's innovation team." Silence. Someone dropped a wine glass. It shattered loudly on the floor. Her uncle nearly choked on his drink. Her aunt's hand froze mid-air, holding a forkful of food. Her cousins looked like statues, shocked and confused. No one spoke. No one moved. Xena, sitting exactly where they had tried to hide her, nodded gently. "Yes, sir," she said in a clear, soft voice. "It's an honor to see you again." The billionaire's face lit up with recognition and respect. "You are doing amazing things. I've been following your work. You're building something truly powerful for Africa's future." Suddenly, the whole energy in the room shifted. All the attention left the Oganwas, their designer clothes, and their fake confidence. Now, it was on the one person they had tried to keep in the background. People leaned in. Eyes widened. Someone even whispered, "That's her," like she was a celebrity. Guests who hadn't spoken to her all evening now wanted to shake her hand. The Oganwas sat in silence, pretending to smile, but their pride was crumbling. The same girl they told to sit near the servers was now the most important person in the room. Their plan to impress the billionaire had completely backfired. They had spent so much time hiding her, only for her to become the reason anyone remembered that night. Xena stayed calm. She didn't need to explain anything. She didn't say, "I told you so." Her success spoke louder than any words ever could. And in that moment, with broken glass still on the floor and silence hanging heavy in the air, everyone finally saw her for who she truly was, not a problem, not a burden, but the biggest pride the family never saw coming. Everything changed in just one sentence. One moment, Xena was ignored, quietly sitting at the edge of the room like she always had during family events. The next, she was the center of attention. After the billionaire recognized her as the CEO of Neurotech and praised her work with Elon Musk's team, the entire mood shifted. The same family that once tried to hide her was now pretending they had loved and supported her all along. It was almost laughable. Suddenly, chairs were moving. People who hadn't even looked at her all evening were now sliding closer, trying to sit near her. Aunts who used to mock her voice were leaning in with smiles too wide to be real. One cousin even reached across the table, whispering, "Just pretend we've always supported you." Xena looked at her for a second. No emotion. No smile. She simply blinked and turned her face away. That silence spoke louder than any words she could have said. They thought she would be excited by their sudden attention. But Xena wasn't moved. She had grown past that need. Years ago, she might have longed for their approval. But not now. She remembered everything too clearly, being told to stay in the kitchen when visitors came, being laughed at for stuttering, being left out of family photos, parties, conversations. The pain was real, but now, so was her power. They had pushed her into the shadows. But she had built her light in that darkness. And now, that light was too bright for them to ignore. People began dropping her name into conversations like they'd always been close. "Xena used to sit on my lap when she was little," one aunt said with a fake laugh. "She was always smart," another chimed in, acting like she saw this success coming all along. But Xena knew the truth. She saw the panic in their eyes, not because they were happy for her, but because they were afraid of being left out of her story. Even the way they looked at her changed. Suddenly, her natural hair wasn't too plain. Her calm way of speaking wasn't too quiet. Now they called it graceful. Her tech company, once seen as a silly idea, was now their favorite topic. They wanted pictures with her, tagged her in posts, and started telling everyone, "She's family." Xena didn't argue. She didn't correct them. She didn't bring up the past. She didn't need to. She smiled politely, stayed composed, and gave her attention to the guests who had shown her respect before they knew her title. That night, she let her success speak. The real shift wasn't just how the world saw her, but how they could no longer deny her. The girl they once tried to hide had become the woman they now couldn't stop talking about. And the best part? Xena didn't have to raise her voice, explain her pain, or ask for a seat. She had already earned it, and they all knew it. Zina stood up slowly, with the same calm and quiet strength that had carried her through years of being ignored, laughed at, and pushed aside. She didn't raise her voice. She didn't need to. Every eye in the room was already on her. The same people who once called her a disgrace were now watching her every move, holding their breath. With a soft, confident smile, she reached into her purse and pulled out a sleek business card. She handed it to the billionaire, the one who had just praised her in front of the entire gathering. "Let me know when your daughter's ready for mentorship," she said kindly, her voice smooth, not a hint of bitterness. Her words were warm, but they carried power, the kind that leaves a lasting mark. The room stayed silent, but it was the kind of silence that crackles with tension. Zina didn't stop there. She turned slowly to face her family. Her eyes scanned the faces that had once told her to stay out of sight, to not ruin their image. She saw the panic behind their fake smiles, the guilt they were trying so hard to hide. Then, in the most graceful tone, she delivered her final line. "Oh, and next time," she said gently, "seat me where I deserve. Not behind your ego." It was quiet after that. Dead quiet. You could hear a pin drop. Her words didn't need to be loud, they cut sharper because they were soft. That one sentence hit harder than any argument. It wasn't just a clapback, it was a mirror held up to their faces. It reminded them of every moment they'd made her feel small, of every opportunity they stole just to protect their pride. Zina didn't wait for a reply. She didn't need an apology or fake praise. She had said what she needed to say, and she had done it with the same class they never gave her. As she sat back down, the energy in the room shifted again. People were stunned. Some looked embarrassed. Others just stared, trying to process what had just happened. The family that once whispered about her behind closed doors had just been called out in the most elegant way possible, and they had no comeback. Her clapback wasn't just for revenge. It was a reminder. A reminder that kindness does not equal weakness, that being quiet doesn't mean being blind. She had heard every insult, felt every rejection, and still rose above it all. And now, she was giving them a chance, not to change the past, but to do better going forward. But whether they would or not didn't really matter anymore. Because Zina had already claimed her place. She had walked through their shame and built something greater than they ever imagined. And now, with grace and power, she had let them know, she wasn't hiding anymore. Today, Zina's name is everywhere. Her face is on bright billboards from Lagos to Nairobi. She's invited to speak at global conferences, her interviews are shared across social media, and people look up to her like a queen. The same family who once called her a disgrace now proudly say, "We always knew she was special." They post her photos online, tell neighbors they're related to her, and act like they were part of her journey. But Zina remembers everything. She remembers being told to stay in the kitchen when guests came. She remembers how they laughed at her stutter, how they looked away when she walked into the room. Back then, she was their embarrassment. Now, they call her their pride. But Zina didn't build her legacy to prove anything to them. She built it for the girls like her, the quiet ones, the awkward ones, the ones people try to hide. She now gives scholarships to girls who are told they're too weird, too ugly, or too embarrassing to be seen. She teaches them that they are enough, even when the world tries to shrink them. Zina never needed to shout for attention. She let her success speak. And in doing so, she turned their shame into her spotlight. What once made her the black sheep became the crown on her head. They tried to erase her, but now, her name is carved in legacy. Not because of them, but in spite of them.